What's up, everyone? Online prep coach Ask here at prepcoach.com. Today, talking about bioregulators. Now, we're going to begin this one a little bit differently. The other seminars, we usually look at biochemistry, pharmacokinetics, and dynamics, and start off with the basics first. This one, though, because they're bioregulators, I want to flip the script, start off with the main 21 ones that I want to talk about, because again, there's hundreds out there. There really is. They're coming out and finding out new ones every day. They're also combining them into combined products now. So I like this, though, because it can teach a little bit about neurology. So again, I was not a naturally smart person, didn't have a naturally good memory, poor memory encoding, poor speech, all that kind of fun stuff. It's taking a lot of drills, neuroplastic work, supplements, and just a lot of effort to get to where I'm at now. And I like to show how I got there. So we're going to be going with some basic, we're not going to do with mnemonics today. We're actually going to go with chunking and with putting things to a song to remember. Because 21, if you just put 21 words, 21 compounds in order, a little bit hard to remember, right? So we're going to remember, we're going to start off with Steve's cousin, okay? So S, T, V, S, C, Steve's cousin. V, S, E, P, S. And I always feel on this one first, because back in the day, I could never remember Stamacort. So we put that there. Then we go over here, right? Now we have V, C, T, C, Z, L, G, G, T, B, B. And remember, this is how I learned it back in the day, and it just stuck with me. So this was repetition for me, going through and remember Steve's cousin to begin, and then putting it to a song, or at least some kind of a melody. S, T, V, S, C, V, S, E, P, S, right? That kind of flows, goes pretty good. I could never, and I always got stuck up on Stamacort. Could not remember it for the life of me. So I always fill that in first whenever I would write it. Then we go to the other column. V, C, T, Z, Z, L, G, G, T, B, B. Again, similar kind of melody, but the cool thing over here is kind of easier to remember because we have two C's, right? So all you have to remember is there's a V, a T, and a Z with two C's stuck between it. Then you have two G's and two B's with an L and a T in between them. So it's kind of easy to remember. And again, you break it up in this chunking fashion into 4 different columns so that you don't have to remember 21 straight compound names, right? Now we're going to begin slowly filling things in, okay? And again, I'm trying to write bigger now. I've read everyone's comments about that. Superfort, Thyrogen, Ventfort, Sigmure, Seralutin, Vladinix, Sphentnorm, Endolutin, Pilotax, and then Stamacort. Now we're going to be going over here. And over here, another sip of water. Over here, we're going to be looking at this column, right? So we're starting off with our Visalutin. So we have our Visalutin. That's going to be our Chitmer, Testalutin, Colihart, Xenolutin. Then I'm going to, that L looks pretty bad. I screwed up that G too. Libidon. Glandacort, I believe that's how you spell it. Godotrix. Taxarest. Bonomarlo. Bonothyroc. So, first of all, if I mispronounced or misspelled them, I apologize in advance. These are some weird ones to say, and you never heard anyone actually say the words, so you never know how you pronounce Godotrax, Taxarest, Bonomarlo, Bonothyroc. That's just how I see it, and that's how I pronounce it. If that's wrong, I apologize. But we have these now in order. So first, remember the concept of chunking. Then remember the concept of putting things to a lyric. Then you go back through, and if you could just remember things in chunks and remember them one at a time, you can slowly fill those things in. So now we'll go back through, and I'll change the color, and we're going to go through and actually look at the organ system that they're mainly looking at here, right? We're having the pancreas, the thyroid, the vascular system, cartilage, brain. First column. Then we're going down and we see the thymus, sphenoid is the liver, and lutein is the pineal gland. Pilotax are the kidneys, so our renal system. Stemacort is our gastric system. Now, visilutein, however you pronounce it. Maybe I should, yeah, I guess I'll put it over here. Visilutein is going to be our retina, okay? Chitomer, and again, things I learned back in the day or how I remember them. You got to take a chit, right? What's close to taking a chit? Your bladder. This is literally how I memorized things back in the day. It just stuck with me for years. We have our bladder. Testilutein is the testes. This one's easy. Holy heart, right? Because that's literally your heart. And xenolutein are your ovaries. Now we go down here. And I apologize that you guys are seeing the back of my head a lot. We have libidon, which is the prostate. Glandicort, which are the adrenals. Gonatrix, which is more of the myological, muscle-based world. Taxarest, which is then being more in the lungs. Bona Marlowe, which is our bone marrow. And bonothyric, which is our parathyroid, so calcium, bone, and stuff like that. So I will connect everything just so we're all on the same page. And now, at least you guys have a little bit easier way to remember the name of each of these bioregulators. But remember, there are multiple different bioregulators out there. There are new ones being found every single day. But I like to at least teach a little bit something new for this seminar. Now, what's even cooler, you might ask yourself, which amino acid complex are these? Well, the way I remembered Steve's cousin was pretty simple, right? So we literally have that A1 complex being superfort, and it literally follows that simple. That's why I did it like that. We have A2, A3, A4, A5, A6, A7, A8, A9, A10. I'm not going to write A all the way down. We'll put another A11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, excessive 21. There we go. So if we put them in order, then it's easy to remember which amino acid complex is theirs. So how cool is that, right? So we could literally memorize these by going through the process of chunking and putting things to a melody, then going through the process of just remembering them in those chunking fashions, the name. And as long as you know your baseline, chemistry, not even chemistry, you just know your baseline products of superfort, what does it do? Thyrogen, what does it do? You're set, you're good to go. So this is the 21, these are the 21 bioregulators that we're going to talk about today. Now, the reason why I want to begin with that, beyond just the neurology, is because with bioregulators, it's interesting. They're very, very, I don't want to say a novel class, because let's scroll back and look at the history, right? This goes back to Pavlov, and this goes back to, Dr. Kavinson over with the KGB and that whole world, and they were literally realizing that the cosmonauts and different kinds of branches were starting to age so fast. So they wanted to make sure that they were reversing the aging, and this has, again, been done for decades upon decades. It's why Putin, has the aging that he's at right now, if we want to word it that way. I think he's aged pretty well, but there's a lot of people over in that side of the world that have been using these compounds for decades, and everyone's responding extremely well to them. There is something we'll talk about at the end about the 50-50 equation. We'll talk about that later on. But overall, these are not new therapies. These are not new compounds. These amino acid complexes have been around for decades. There's thousands upon thousands of research studies on them. They are obviously not in English, so you have to have someone actually translate them. But if you go through the translation process, you start to realize there's been a lot of data on these compounds. And the coolest thing about them is that they are beyond safe. So first of all, we're looking at all these bioregulators, and we are looking at them as nanomedicine. We call it nanomedicine because if you look at a nanometer, it's literally 1/1000th of a whole. So if you look at, technically in this world, you're looking at that 1 nanometer, which is equal to the length of 6 carbon atoms, right? So we have 1 nanometer equals 6 carbon atoms in terms of length. The reason why that's important is because when we're manufacturing proteins, when we can drive the end fate of gene transcription and all of the epigenetic switches that can be turned on or off, you're looking at a couple different things. First of all, these are all just amino acids. So a couple questions we have to ask ourselves, right? Okay. First of all, we're getting amino acids from food. We're getting it from intestinal bacteria, and we're getting it from cell bodies, okay? We understand that. But what questions we have to ask ourselves to understand and figure out what classifies these as being different from normal amino acid strains, like 22 kilodalton growth hormone, 191 amino acids in length. We're looking more at asking ourselves, are they ribosomally or non-ribosomally derived? How are they actually being transported? And is there any kind of receptor-mediated action? And there's other questions to ask yourselves, but to me, these are the 3 most important ones, because if we don't have an issue with ribosomal systems or an issue with transportation or an issue with receptors, if we can bypass all that and essentially say, hey, just get straight in and cause genetic expression, then you have a lot of roadblocks that are now moved. If you look at different receptors, there could be issues with the ligand binding domain. There could be issues with the hinge region. There could be issues with the DNA binding domain. So right out of the gate, if we don't have a receptor to manage and really worry about, then there's going to be no problem with the receptor that we have to worry about, literally. So with bioregulators, we don't have to worry about the receptor. The transport, because of how small they are as nanomedicines, they're getting into and traversing these cells easily. So the way it's happening, maybe I'll put a different color. I'll go red because I can see that. What we're looking at here is we have an actual plasma membrane. Is that big enough? Yeah, I can write a little bit bigger. Plasma membrane. We have a nuclear membrane. So we have these membranes that are going through. We're actually getting into the actual nuclei, interacting with DNA and causing epigenetic expression. So if we could kind of look at this in terms of different layers, I might have screwed this up. Either way, if we have this different layers, when we're taking our actual bioregulator, it's passing through plasma, nuclear membranes in the nucleus, interacting with the DNA, and causing that ultimate gene expression. So now, transport is not an issue. The ribosomal side of things is not an issue because we're taking these supplementally. So there's always going to be the DNA mRNA cascade that occurs for transcription and for differentiation, right? So proliferation, differentiation, that's what we're looking at there. But it's not going to be a rate-limiting factor. And that's massive because certain drugs, certain compounds can be limited by ribosomal systems and enzyme-based systems. We don't see that with these bioregulators. And that's, again, one of the many reasons why it makes them so unique and so different. So if we understand this, okay, working as a nanomedicine, we're looking at a couple amino acids. Generally, we say what, about 2 to 4? Something like 2 to 4 amino acids. The cool thing about them is even though they're only a couple amino acids, if you change their conformational shape and structure, so if you move one amino acid from, let's say, from here to here, I won't write that on the board yet, that can change its end fate. So that's where we get something like the thymogen, and that's where you also get the vilon, where you can have the same amino acid structure and some profiles, but you can move the configuration, change its end fate, and change its end goal and expression. So as an overall rule, we are looking at these bioregulators as being epigenetic modulators. So the cool thing about this is it's not modulating epigenetics in the wrong way. So it's not like we're opening up and decondensing chromatin or unrolling chromatin and having this open DNA substance that we can actually screw up. These are going in and only sending on positive signals. So what do we see? We see in here that upregulation in or proliferation, differentiation. We have all the positive chemical signals. And then we also see a downregulation. And actually, I should, depending on how you want to word apoptosis, because apoptosizing, was that a word? Apoptosizing. Driving apoptosis with healthy cells is bad. Driving apoptosis of unhealthy cells is good. So in this kind of world, we are driving up apoptosis of unhealthy cells. So it's not turning on any kind of thermogenesis. It's not going to cause you to turn on any negative epigenetic cascades. It's only turning on positive cascades. So you could put it up or down depending on which cell type and which cluster you're looking at in the organ. But regardless, it's only having the ability to turn on positive end fates. That is massive. That is massively beneficial as a whole. So we understand roughly what these are. We understand that we're looking at here. Let's kind of look at a couple of these as examples, okay? So they're pretty straightforward, and that's what kind of makes these almost unbelievable, right? So if you would actually take these orally, very orally bioavailable, I think for a while a lot of people didn't like them because they were orally bioavailable and they didn't think that they would actually pass through gastric systems and they wouldn't actually get and have an end fate. The problem with that is if you look at the end caps of these amino acids, they are basically acetylated, and you see that amination process. So we're capping them so that they're really not being destroyed. And remember how small they are. These are traversing the cells. These are smaller, going through the cells and getting straight into the DNA and causing epigenetic expression. So the whole problem of oral bioavailability is not a problem at all because of those end caps. So right out of the gate, we don't have a problem with that. But if we go down and look, they're pretty specific to the organ type, right? So the amino acid complex of superfort is mainly going to be going over and driving up pancreatic cascades. So in this world, usually with the pancreas, we can see some positive changes. Usually what we end up seeing, if we look at lab work, for example, is we're going to see improvements in beta cell functioning. So by taking superfort, you could see an improvement to glucose metabolism. You could see a downregulation in insulin insensitivity. You could see the pancreatic beta cells starting to improve their function. Same thing with the thyrogen. In the thyroid-based world, what we tend to see is if TSH is high, it's going to bring TSH lower. It is going to normalize T3, T4 levels. It tends to normalize deodanase enzymes as well. So the key point we're trying to hit home, we're going to go with every single one of these here. We are normalizing the system. So we are not trying to drive things to supraphysiological levels. We're not trying to drive things to those hypo-based levels. We're trying to keep things right at that baseline where longevity thrives. We've talked about this all the time in biology, right? If we look at longevity, the extremes are where you run into trouble. Bioregulators put you right in the middle, okay? So vent-for, the vascular system. Again, with this, we tend to see a pretty, again, if blood pressure is high, we see a downregulation in blood pressure. That can then also mean an increase to clitoral or penile hemodynamics, so better erections, better overall orgasmic strength. We see everything that affects blood flow, which could be basically everything, nutrient partitioning, cerebral hemodynamics, that can all be improved with that vascular actual bioregulator. Sigma, now for cartilage. This is, again, starting to rebuild that soft tissue. So all of a sudden now the inflamed joints that you once had start to get down-regulated. So we tend to see a pretty good down-regulation in overall inflammatory factors in your cartilage-based tissues. We're now looking at seralutin. So again, looking more at the brain. This is where we see a balancing of monoamines and usually an overall balancing of neurotransmitters. So I'm going to put the word balance because I think that's very important. Again, what are we talking about here? If we have someone who's taking seralutin, who might be needing an SSRI because they can't manage their own serotonin, we can sometimes, not everyone, but we can sometimes work off their SSRI by bringing seralutin in. Or might need other players in there to also change the baseline neurochemistry, but there's a lot of different things it can do, but it's balancing. If you have low dopamine, it's improving that. If you have high dopamine, it's pulling it down. So you have a case to use it in dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, high performance-based athletes, people with neurological dysfunctions, pretty much all the above, right? Now the thymus, immune health. Absolutely amazing for immune health. So what we're going to do, I thought I wrote bigger to have enough space on the board, but I need one of those huge industrial-sized boards, apparently. But, okay, so as we get older, we have that Th1, Th2, we have that, the glandular and postglandular action. We see that imbalance. We see all this inflammation shooting up, and then in the gland, those T1 levels, we start to see a lot of downregulation, and then what does that end up causing? Those Th1s start to pull down on our immunity. So that's where we look at the TH-based imbalances we're seeing. Sometimes they say CT, TH, but essentially we're looking at intraglandular and postglandular action, postglandular being inflammation, intraglandular being the actual immune-based functioning that's surviving and causing us to survive. So we can balance out that thymus gland because as we get older, it tends to calcify and not work as well. So you can bring this in to improve that. Liver, pretty basic, pretty straightforward. We tend to see downregulations in our aspartate aminotransferase and our alanine aminotransferase. Then it tends to normalize bilirubin and alk phos as well because of the secondary and tertiary effects that happen there. But again, the liver is being improved if you have a dysfunctional or mismanaged hepatic system. The pineal gland. This is an interesting one. So we have seen, again, and the research doesn't always hold up because I think this is where we have to break away from the research a little bit. Even though there's been thousands of studies done, we don't see people taking these bioregulators and living to be 150 years old yet. So bioregulators will not get us to 150, but bioregulators to me are going to get us to 100, which is a good start because people are generally getting to like 70, 80 years old now and passing and having a pretty poor quality of life at that point. So to me, this is that stepping stone to then bridge to then the telomerase side of things and the bridge into the genetic encoding and the go even further on. But to me, these bioregulators are the stepping stone, right? So the pineal gland has a lot of research in terms of adding longevity in terms of what was it? It was like 25%, 40%, depending on which research you were reading about lifespan. Does not play out like that in actual application, but in the right context and scenario, what we're seeing in real world application is we're slowly starting to elongate life and quality of life, which is pretty cool. But again, these are not the players going to get us to 150 years old, but these are the players going to extend us to 100. It's not improving our lifespan by 40% though, because if that was the case, we'd be having some pretty crazy numbers. We just don't see that yet. So I believe that this is a complementary therapy, kind of like everything, because in biology, you can't just take one thing. You can't just do one thing. There's a multiple different things. So we have multiple different cells, multiple different tissue types, multiple different everything. So the pineal gland can also drive a lot of cool circadian-based changes, and it can drive a lot of good neurochemical and neurological healing-based effects. So that pineal, that endolutin, it does a lot of different stuff. So I'm literally just going to put a lot because there's a lot of things that it does. And moving forward, if I put the plus, that just means a lot. Now we're looking at the pilotax. That's going to be our kidneys, so our renal-based system. Usually, we see a downregulation overall kidney-based inflammation, which shoots up EGFR. So EGFR is our estimated glomerular filtration rate, little e, big GFR. Remember, this is a calculation. This is looking at math. This is inflammation to renal health. So if you really want to know how your kidneys are doing, check your cystatin C. That'll give you your kidney health independent of inflammation. Stamachord, your gastric system. I like this one as a complementary therapy for people that have the traditional, the SIBOs, the gut dysbiosis, things like that. Anyone who has a gut-based problem, we tend to bring in Stamachord. Another thing it can do, again, is kind of balancing out that biome so it can fix dysbiosis. It's normally not the only part that needs to be there, but it's a pretty good player for dysbiosis. So we're going to say it's going to downregulate. Actually, I'm going to say improve the gut biome, right? Now, Visolutin. There's eye drops out there. There's a couple different bioregulators for the eyes. Actually, this one's mainly for the retina. Remember, in ocular tissue, we're looking at 3 different tunic layers. We're looking at the sclerola. We're looking at multiple different areas inside the vitreal humerus. There's a lot of things when it comes to actually fixing eyes and reversing eyes. Again, I used to wear glasses for 8 years, something like that. Moderate prescription, nothing crazy, but I haven't worn glasses now for, I think, about a full year, maybe a little bit longer, which is pretty cool. I specifically actually did not use a bioregulator for my eyes. I used things I've talked about multiple times beforehand, but Visolutin tends to work pretty decently well. What it's doing, what I mainly see it doing in the retina, is pulling down inflammation. So I usually see retinal inflammation coming down and reduction in glycation. So accumulation of people that can't manage their sugars well, that'll actually cause the inflammation in the eyes. So we're generally seeing, you have to erase this. We're generally seeing that improvement to ocular inflammation, pulling those levels down. And yes, ever since I used that dry erase marker or board, whatever, I had to switch to a towel because it broke and it put, there was like, what is that? Like that sticky stuff on it, almost like glue, and it got all over here, and I just scrubbed this board forever. So I'm stuck with a good old towel. So anyway, we're going to ocular inflammation downregulation. Chitmer, bladder. This is a tough one. So I have had a lot of people with OAB, so overactive bladder, problems and dysfunctions. This one tends to not work that well purely from experience. There's other bioregulators I do really like for the bladder, for OAB, but Chitmer is one that's kind of hit or miss even more so than some of the other ones. So we're going to say potentially the downregulation in overactive bladder. It can bring down some bladder-based inflammation. It tends to not do that good of a job in application. Testolutin, obviously the testes. This is the one that's going to normalize testosterone levels. So again, we're going to say it's going to normalize our androgen profile in males. Cello heart, Cleo heart, however you want to pronounce that, that's looking at cardiovascular systems, obviously looking at the heart. We see this mainly doing what? I see actually doing a couple things, which is cool. It is down-regulating that cardiac inflammation while also increasing cardiac strength. So if you had a weak, right ventricle, it's going to help strengthen that right ventricle while pulling down maybe the myocarditis or whatever kind of cardiac inflammation you have. Xenolutin ovaries. So this is cool because, again, with females, we are literally normalizing hormones. There is the GPL-FEM, F-E-M-M-E, which is a combination of a couple different bioregulators. I've really been liking that for the females that actually need to go on. And so they're obviously having, perimenopausal symptoms. Maybe they don't want to take the jump and take HRT yet. I've had a lot of people use that GPL-FEM that has xenolutin in it to normalize the ovaries and the hormones. We could usually get away with, maybe a year, 2 years by bringing that in. Sometimes the xenolutin isn't enough by itself, but overall it has a lot of valid application, and xenolutin as a whole, depending on your age and just where you're at on that whole perimenopausal journey, it could be a really big game changer for you. Libidon for the prostate. So this is pulling down prostate-based inflammation and pulling down prostate-based hypertrophy. I use that a lot in almost all of my prostate cancer-based individuals and clients that I work with. And we always bring their prostate cancer down. Like literally, I think it's like probably 9.5 times out of 10. Same thing with breast cancer. I got really good at that, but not looking at breast cancer. The Libidon's mainly obviously for the prostate. Glyndicort for the adrenals. This is a good one in today's society because usually those adrenals are shot from being overly sympathetic from our caffeine, from our stimulants, from having all of the high arousal of the world. No one's low arousal anymore. Usually in that kind of a world, we could bring this in to actually improve the adrenals. So we're going to literally just put up, meaning it's improving adrenal-based action. So it's pulling down adrenal-based stress. This could be a good adjunctive therapy with a couple other adrenal-based over-the-counter supplements to kind of layer things in like a rhodiola, ashwagandha, like some of the basic things, right? Go to tracks. I really like this one for the myological. So building muscle tissue. I think the combination of go to tracks and where are we? Testolutin. That combination can drive anabolism in males pretty dang well. Same thing with the females, but you're looking at go to tracks and then xenolutin. That combination to drive up muscular anabolism is actually pretty impressive. It's a really cool compound. Tax arrest in the lungs. This actually does a lot. So I'm going to do the plus, like I said over there. So with tax arrest, we use this a lot during 2020 for obvious reasons. We were bringing down lung-based fibrosis. We're bringing down lung-based inflammation. We're improving circulation. I've also used this in my Olympic athletes to help improve that lower lung recycling of blood and oxygen throughout the rest of the body as long as you take our carbon dioxide. It does a lot of cool things. So tax arrest is one. Same with go to tracks. I just don't think they get enough love and they're not talked about enough, but they're freaking awesome. Bone marrow, bone marrow obviously strengthens the bone marrow, but why I love it that no one really talks about is it will do what? It's going to improve, oh, I'm writing on the wrong side. Stem cell donation. So this goes back to the CXCR4 STF1 cascade. We're trying to disassociate and don't get stem cells from binding in the bone marrow and going back in. We're trying to push it out into the blood. You can combine bone marrow to improve the stem cell donation into the blood, combine it with your stem regens, with your GHKCUs, combine it with your stem cell therapies, combine it with your exosome therapies. There's so many things that can go on here. I think this is probably another one of the most underrepresented bioregulators, right? And then bonothyric for parathyroid hormone. Again, this is more calcium-based, blood-bone-based, has a lot of co-application. I kind of put it in the category like the Chitmer, where it just doesn't have as much valid application in terms of practical application. So although it has good changes to parathyroid and to obviously spill over to calcium metabolism and thyroid-based effects, I kind of see it as not being that good of a player. Same kind of thing with, where are we? The Chitmer for your bladder. And this kind of brings me to my next point. So if we're just looking at these 21, right? All bioregulators, and again, this is not looking at the research, because if you read the research out there, because I've read, at this point, a couple hundred of the research studies that were translated from Russian to English. And if you were to just read those studies, you would think this is going to be completely game-changing for the world and everyone's going to benefit from it. It's going to completely revolutionize medicine. It is revolutionizing medicine. It is revolutionizing medicine. That's what I'm trying to say. It is improving that 70-year-old to 100-year gap, those 30 years that we were missing. That 70-30 ratio and that number, if you read the research, is very big. That's all 100% true. The problem is, in application, I only see bioregulators working for about 50% of the population, meaning it either works extremely well or you get nothing out of them. And this is from looking at thousands of people over the years. And I think this is the difference. In actual clinical research, we are looking at individuals, or we are looking not even at humans. We are looking at certain individuals that are not androgen using, peptide using, optimizing, right? Everyone's taking bioregulators today. They are also probably taking some form of hormone replacement therapy or some way to improve their hormones. They're probably taking a little bit of BPC, maybe a little metformin. Maybe they're doing their extra sun exposure. Maybe they have their near-infrared light. Maybe they're doing cold therapy. Maybe they're doing the cold lasers. The point I'm trying to make is you list all these different therapies now, and to me, I see it kind of detracting away from the bioregulators, meaning it's the other therapies are working so well, it's not allowing bioregulators to do the full action they can do. But at the end of the day, that's not a bad thing. Because if we are all, let's just stick with the 70-30 number, right? If we are all going to go from, if we're trying to get back these 30 years, whether you get back these 30 years from a combination of things or just one thing, it doesn't really matter. I do believe that bioregulators, just from seeing it work so many times, I think it's something that everyone should trial out. Again, though, certain people will take them and say, I felt nothing, I saw nothing, labs didn't change. That's just the reality of pharmacokinetics and dynamics. Not every person responds well to every supplement or every drug. But regardless, they can bridge the gap for a lot of people. But again, it is never monotherapy. With longevity, with everything in biology, it's always going to be polypharmacy or polymultiple. There has to be multiple different things in play, because with biology, we don't just have one cell type. We don't just have one stressor in the world. We have the overaccumulation of plastics, the poor lighting that I'm recording this video in, the poor water, the nutrient-depleted soil, the lack of sun exposure, the lack of exercise. We have all these different things going on that are causing all these insults to put us back here. So as long as we're pushing back up to here and then after that going plus, that's cool. So I see if we were living back in the day, right, before we had all the plastics and poor lighting and before we're in today's society, if we were just having bioregulators, I do believe they were seeing what they saw in the research where they're increasing the 30-year lifespan improvement. I completely agree with that. The problem is that research is older and we are not living in the same society today. And on top of that, again, we're not the same individuals. Taking HRT still was, I mean, it was happening obviously, but it wasn't as mainstream as it is now. Having BPC and TB and GHK and stem cell therapy, exosome therapy, doing our cold plunges, like these things weren't really common until how long ago? Maybe at best 10 years. Like we've been doing it in the background for 10 to 15 years, right? But even at that, that's only a decade. This research goes back freaking forever ago. So I want to be very real and upfront and honest with people. I love bioregulators. They work extremely well, but because of our society and because of all the different compounds and modalities and therapies we're doing in today's society, it is not going to be the complete absolute game changer for everyone. It can still help you though. So again, maybe these bioregulators are giving you 10 years back. So you go to 80 and then everything else you do gives you the other 10 or the other 20 rather. I'm bad at math. Regardless, doesn't matter. I believe that bioregulators are things that everyone should trial out. And there's something you should at least see for yourself. To me, it's funny. I don't like basing things off of, do you feel it? But with these bioregulators, over the years, with all these thousands of people, you feel it. You really do feel good. So I am someone who is a hyper responder. So saying everything I just said, I'm a hyper responder to bioregulators. So I'm taking my Thyrogen daily right now. I'll probably take that long term because I personally had a downregulation of my thyroid gland just because I'm 250 and I'm naturally, I was 145 at my first bodybuilding show years ago, don't compete anymore. But because of that, thyroid gland takes a hit. On top of that, I'm trying to drive my longevity. So every weekend I have my bioregulator replacement therapy of my thymogen alpha-1 and my GPL man. And I'll add things to that like there, but I notice a difference in my thyroid output and I see it in lab work. On top of that, I notice a massive difference on the days I do not take GPL man and on the days I do not take my thymogen alpha-1. If I'm taking thymogen alpha-1 consistently, I do not get sick. Literally, I got sick one time in the past year and a half, something like that, and that was me being stupid, essentially, and not taking what I should have been taking. But again, I'm saying everything I said beforehand where it's 50-50 split for most people because the ones that don't feel it then also don't see it on lab work. And then I don't know if that's actually producing the epigenetic results. Because if you are taking pancreatic Superfort, for example, when it's normalizing your beta cell functioning, you should notice that. You should notice your blood sugar is being more stable. You should notice on your lab work, maybe HbA1c, maybe C-peptide, maybe these things are more managed. So I'm a big fan of looking at these bioregulators in terms of biological and bio-based feedback. So to me, if you're taking a bioregulator, you should feel them. You should notice a difference because whenever you're healthier, like taking a lot of these health supplements, sometimes over-the-counter supplements, you can't really tell if you are getting a benefit out of them besides lab work because you don't always feel them all the time. This is the only classification of health supplements besides like glutathiones and stuff like that where you take it and you should immediately feel healthier. You should have more energy. Everything should be more robust. You should be able to have more ability to tolerate stress. And to me, that's a good way to base it, but also based off of lab work. So do both. Do your traditional epigenetic testing. Do your biological age. Get your lab work and then correlate that with your biofeedback. But there needs to be some kind of a positive change because whenever you have a 50-50 split and certain people that get nothing out of it, it's because everything else they're doing is moving the needle and they don't need any more. If they dropped everything and just brought in bioregulators, then that would bridge the gap. They wouldn't need those other players, but usually people aren't going to do that. So that's why they're still helpful for those 50% of people, but it's usually because of the other therapies. Those other people don't need it. So I want to be very clear and upfront about that. Now, wow, there's a lot to talk about. Dosing, frequency, a way to set things up. There's so many ways we can go this. I think going back to the original research, because everyone likes to, I think most people think that there's like one protocol for this, one protocol for that. Like there's very few protocols. In reality, read the research. Those hundreds of studies, those thousands of studies rather, There are so many different therapies and protocols and ways to do these things that it's almost infinite. It really, really is. So the way I like to break it down, first of all, spectrums. Where are you dysfunctional wise? Okay, so we're going to go on this dysfunctional scale. Are you closer to sick or closer to healthy? If you're sick, HSCRP, thymic action, probably liver enzymes, probably your renal system, probably your cardiac system, probably your neurological system, things are going to be shot. So if we have that underlying, so the way it works is we have underlying, I guess we'll start there. So it's starting with that quantum-based spin, that our spin of our upstream particles get thrown off. Those protons and electrons then go more upstream and they start affecting, what do we have there? Our cells, right? They start affecting our cells, then go upstream and start affecting our actual tissues and organs and so many things. But sickness as a whole is starting off in that quantum realm where all you're looking at is what's moving the upstream dynamics, which means depending on how things are spinning, vibration, spin, frequency, all that fun stuff is affecting our subatomic particles, which are then affecting our cells, which are then affecting our tissue organs, which is then making us sick or healthy. So the worse you are downstream here, the more sick you're going to be. So that sickness can be multiple things, but we know there's multiple problems. So the normal dogma is if we're sick, fix the organ. I don't like that. If we're sick, maybe fix the cells. Okay, that's cool. But if you're fixing these two, what's wrong? The baseline problem is being solved. So first therapies, we generally like to tend to fix the quantum side of things first, so that that spin of our ATPase, that actual movement of all of the atoms in our body are more cohesive with our biology and with our environment around us. So you fix those, that's number one. Then from there, you fix the proton-electron conversation, where most people neglect, and maybe certain people cannot do certain types of exercise and activity, but that's what handles down-regulating the actual leak and slip of protons and electrons. So remember, that's where we're going back. We're looking at our mitochondria, inner membrane, complex 1, 2, 3, 4, ATPase right there. As we're skipping electrons here, we're pushing protons out into here. What can happen is in this state, if you're dysfunctional and sick, you're leaking those protons, you're leaking those electrons. Those then go ahead and accumulate what? Do you remember? You guys remember from the video beforehand. Accumulate all of those hydrogen peroxide damaging radicals that cause accumulations of reactive oxygen species. So fixing subatomic particles comes down to handling oxygen better. That could be a walk outside. That could be far-end spectrum glycolytic HIIT-based work. That could be weight training. But that's where actually exercise comes in. Then we go upstream and then we fix the cells, which is number 3. And then that will indirectly and it will also directly fix those tissues and organs. Rant out of the way. Let's go back over here. If we're looking at the dysfunctional cell of bioregulators, the way I do it is the sicker you are, the higher your frequency is, and probably the higher your dose you are. So if we're looking at bioregulator usage, then we are looking at things being higher frequency and higher dose, the more sick you are. Then going over here, we have the lower frequency and the lower dose. This can then also change the modality, where maybe if we're more sick, we might want to go with an injectable preparation, right? Whereas maybe if we're just using it for longevity and health purposes, we may want to go with the oral counterpart. There's a time and a place to use both, orals and injections. There's a time and a place to only use one or the other. As a general rule of thumb, though, I like to gauge it on this scale of how sick are you or how healthy are you. I think that's a really good way to begin. So going through some examples is pretty important. Let's say, and I'll change marker colors. Let's say someone has heart failure, right? We'll go with red. So someone over here has actual heart failure, okay? This is someone who's more than likely going to want to bring in something like the Chloe heart, and more than likely, we can dose this. I actually really like the capsules for this one. Works with capsules for this video. I really like using one capsule, AM, noon, and PM. You can keep that dosing high until the problem's resolved and then taper off. And then eventually have it in infrequently because you know that's your epigenetic weakness. So if you know you're epigenetically weak in the heart, then you should probably have a bioregulator in play at some point in the year or chronically in the background if you have a high amount of cardiac damage. So with that, we would also tend to bring in something like our injectable carnitine before bed to improve that deacylation, reacylation cycle, to clear heart-based irons and metals and things like that, to do so many cool things in a de-energized nocturnal state. We're more than likely going to make sure we have our CoQs in, so like our CoQ10s and things like that. We're probably going to go ahead and bring in a lot of other players. Our curcumins, our glutathiones, our carbon 60s, lots of things that can go there. But essentially, we're looking at a high dose protocol of the bioregulator done multiple times per day for extended periods of time until the problem's fixed. Opposite, right? So let's go over here. Let's say the healthy person. This person is just trying to make sure that they're driving longevity. They don't really have any, familial history of problems, or maybe they do. Maybe they always got sick when they were younger. Maybe their family always was sick, whatever. Let's say this is the person who's trying to just drive longevity. This is where we could do actually what I talked about earlier. So overall, we're trying to look at driving longevity here, right? The basic protocol we're looking at over here is what I said before. GPL man or woman has 2 M's. And we are looking at taking 1 to 2 caps. And we're doing only on the weekends. Wow, that looks terrible on the capsules. There we go. We'll also go ahead and plug in our Thymogen Alpha 1, same kind of thing. 1 to 2 caps on Saturday and 1 to 2 caps on Sunday, preferably in the morning, usually to set you up for that day. So we have this spectrum from sick to healthy, just trying to drive longevity. You can literally do this multiple different ways. You can do it just on the weekends. You can do it every single day. You can go through traditional courses of 30 days on end. I personally, and we'll erase some of this because now we'll give a little bit more. So we have kind of an example. We looked at the dysfunctional kind of scale and how people can really do things. I kind of really like setting it up like this. So overall longevity. Let's say again, no familial history, no problems. And actually, before we get to that, with bioregulators, you cannot take too much. It's not something you can overdose on, but at a certain point, you won't get any more additional chemical signals. So what that means is you will just be taking it, not getting anything extra out of it. So literally, it's a matter of finances. If I'm being completely honest with you guys, everyone could take every bioregulator out there, probably every single day, not have any problems. But at some point, you're going to be wasting money because you can only drive so much epigenetic expression. So if we kind of take a step back from that, but keep that mentality, knowing we can't overdose on these things. To me, if we're looking at sheer longevity, again, let's say finances are not a problem because I work with a lot of people that are the, 10 figures plus all that kind of fun stuff to have all the money in the world. What we do in this case scenario is we would use literally every bioregulator out there. Now, you could break this up a bunch of different ways. One of the ways you could do it is you could split it and, again, take them all weekends only. You could break them up and you could have specific days of the week where maybe Monday you do your heart, Tuesday you do your eyes, Wednesday you do your liver, Thursday you do your pancreas. You could break that up a bunch of different ways and over the course of the week have every single bioregulator in play. If you're doing that, there's no rhyme or reason on timing. And usually if we're looking at the traditional oral capsules, you're generally going to be looking at something like 1 cap daily, depending on what you're trying to do. Or again, if that's going to be the week specific, you could do 1 cap of Chloe Hart on Monday, 1 cap of Ventafort on Tuesday. You just go down the list and things like that. That's kind of what we're looking at there. And again, you could literally do that if finances are not a problem. I have a lot of people that have done that and pretty successfully, and those people absolutely love it. But again, it's pretty expensive. So if you're not that person, you're trying to still drive longevity, right? You can go through the courses. And this is the traditional thing that most people do. I think this is what's really popularized online, which is more than fine. You could literally do something as simple as "30-day rotations." With these 30-day rotations, again, you could pick one thing at a time. This month is a heart month. Next month is a liver month. Next month is, and you just keep doing that till you get through all of them, and then you cycle back to them again. That's going to be easier on the wallet and still works extremely well. Now, you could do multiple different combinations and things like that. There is no need to worry about, oh, if I did this one course of 30 days, I have to wait another 6 days before I do it again. That's not a problem. But you might not need it again right away. But again, if you have the finances, it doesn't matter because at least you're ensuring your health's going to be fine. So you could literally just nuke this and go bioregulators every single day. We do this in application all the time. You could also do the rotational courses like many people do. You could also go that step further and do what we said, kind of like this. We're going to go for someone who needs even more of a budget, weekends only, with focus. So this option is someone who knows they have. So if we're looking at budget-wise, by the way, this person has a little bit of money. This person has a decent amount of money. This person has all the money in the world. This person could look and say, okay, I have a heart problem and I have probably a penogram problem. So then you would take those 2 compounds only on the weekends. So then long-term, you're getting that replacement. You're not taking it daily, just Saturday and Sunday, probably 1 to 2 caps depending. And you're slowly repleting that organ tissue, those DNA issues in those areas that you have a problem with. But again, you could do this a bunch of different ways. I've dosed these in multiple different ways, multiple different fashions. And the injectable preparations usually start, you could do about a couple hundred micrograms, couple milligrams. But I've even used bolus amounts of a full 20 milligram vial of violons and compounds like that if we're trying to alter epigenetic expression and tons of things. So we can go on and on. Again, if you're sick though, so this is the longevity options. If you're kind of sick, then we're looking at high dose, high frequency. Now something that, make it look a little bit better. Something I really like, the athletic world, right? So from the NFL to the Olympics to IFBB pros to the NHL, so I could just keep naming organizations that I've utilized bioregulators in. I absolutely love using bioregulators for those athletes. Drug tested or not does not matter because they're naturally occurring, nothing's banned or anything, can't even test for it. They work extremely well in the athletic world. I tend to prefer to balance out and focus more so on recovery. If you're an elite level athlete, what holds you back is your recovery. It's usually never building more muscle. It's usually never improving your performance more, even though those can be very well needed for certain individuals. It's generally recovery based. So no matter what, I'm trying to have a 2-to-1 ratio, generally, of recovery to performance enhancement. Because at that level of genetics, if they're the highest end of the spectrum of their sport, they are going to have the response that's going to be pretty miraculous. So we're trying to have a 2-to-1 ratio of recovery to performance enhancement. So that would mean probably something for over on the recovery side, something for neurological tissue, and then probably pick an organ that you know that you're weak at, or maybe it's cartilage, something like that. And then the performance side of things, that could be the muscular-based player. That could be the pineal gland-based player. That could be the serotins to drive the actual brain-based changes, depending on who you are and what you need. But I like that ratio because usually at elite level sports, performance always needs to improve, but what's more important is not getting injured in the process. So this is a very brief seminar on bioregulators. There are a lot more bioregulators out there. They are extremely safe. They are nanomedicines that are truly changing the world. The reason why, though, like we said earlier, that it's kind of 50-50 split on whether people are good responders to them or not, is because of everything else in play, because those other compounds in play were not in play in all the research that was done on them over the years. And there's some new doctors, some new research that are actually trying this out and seeing it for themselves. That's been my experience. And bioregulators, even with that being said, are absolutely awesome. It's a tool that I think if everyone can afford it to definitely start looking into it. It's nice because the oral preparations you can give to your grandparents. They don't have to worry about anything crazy. You don't have to worry about drug-to-drug interactions. There's literally 0 negative side effects. That being said, there will always be some kind of wacky response somewhere out there. There's always that 1% of person who will get like a Herxheimer reaction or some kind of an overall skin-based dermal irritation or something wacky. That does happen, but I think I've only seen that happen 3 times in about 10-ish years, something like that. So I kind of like those numbers. And again, you also don't know if those handful of cases were driven by something else in circulation. So very safe, awesome compounds. Bioregulators are absolutely amazing. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Check out thepepcoach.com. See you next time.